You don't have to be afraid of me. I know what it's like being different.
This might be long, but this thing, whatever it is, keeps coming back, and I have no idea what it is. My first experience with this thing was when I was 11. It was at night, and I was laying in bed on my right side facing the wall, when I heard footsteps right behind me. I thought it was my mother because she would come and check on me a lot when I was younger. So I would just ignore it because I thought it was her. But this was not the case. This thing sat on the edge of my bed, and when I say sat, I mean I could feel the bed sinking in. I tried to ignore it when I felt it rubbing my leg. I sat straight up in bed to see nothing there, but I could still feel it sitting there, so I told it mistakenly that it could stay, but not to scare me like that ever again. I now know that that was a mistake, and that I shouldn't have told it to stay. But I did. The next experience I had was when I was 18, and it was during the summer of 2013. I was in bed sleeping when I woke up from a panic attack. I never woke up with a panic attack before, at least not suddenly. As I was trying to calm myself down, I felt like I was being watched. But I pushed that off as being panicky, and I went back to sleep. But then I woke back up again with another panic attack, which again I thought was rather odd. At this point, my heart was racing and I couldn't catch my breath. It was very cold in my room, and the air was thick. But the odd part was that I was really hot. I mean, I could feel how cold it was, but physically I was really warm. Plus, I sleep with an eye mask on because I get really bad headaches, and my eyes get really sensitive to light. Anyway, I felt something rub against my leg, and at first I thought I was imagining it, so I moved my leg to kick something hard at the end of my bed. Then I thought it was my cat as I closed my eyes again, but I realized that my cat wasn't in the room that night, because my door was closed all the way. I lay there frozen, wondering what was sitting at the end of my bed. I moved my foot over to hit something solid as it moved. I was beyond terrified at this point. I thought someone broke in. So I took off my eye mask and looked towards the spot to see a black figure of a man. When I say a black figure, I mean it was pitch black with white glowing eyes. I got up and walked towards my bedroom door and disappeared through it. Well, a year and a half went by without seeing that thing again, and I thought that it might have left, but I was wrong. I was laying on my right side again, trying to drift off to sleep, when I heard footsteps again right behind me. My eyes flew open as I looked at my wall in front of me where there was a mirror, and I saw a shadow of a man right behind me. I was freaked out as this thing leaned on my bed, and I could feel its weight on the bed behind me like someone was there. It leaned over me before whispering in my ear saying,
"Lauren, are you awake?"
I closed my eyes as I felt my bedsheets lift up and someone get into bed behind me. I felt their hand on my hip before it brought me closer to him. I mean, it was cuddling with me, and I could feel its hot breath on my neck. I laid there for a few minutes, afraid to move, but decided to in the end. I turned over to see nothing there, and it was gone. The next encounter with this thing was a year ago, and I was taking a nap. I kept going in between being half awake and being half asleep, if you know what I mean. Well, I was having a dream at this point, I will say that. But I was laying on this hot guy's abs, and I usually don't have these types of dreams. This hot guy was tickling my back, and he would go all the way down to start at the top of my butt. I wavered back to being half awake and groggy, to realize that I was laying on my stomach, which, let me tell you, I never do because I hate the feel of it. Anyway, I was lying on my stomach, and my shirt was pushed up, and I felt light, cold fingers tracing and tickling my back. I also felt like someone was sitting on me. I wavered back into the dream to still feel the hot guy tickling me. I tried to look up to see his face, but he pushed my head back down and held my head there. I continued to enjoy it touching my back when the scene changed, and now I was lying on my back with the hot guy on top of me. My head was to the side, and the hot guy was kissing my neck as his hands trailed up and down my sides. I honestly enjoyed it, because I thought I was dreaming, but now I'm not so sure. I wavered back to being half awake to take notice that I was in the same position as I was in the dream, and I could feel something on top of me, doing the same thing like in my dream. But I was groggy to react, almost like it wanted me like that. I felt it kissing my right ear and felt its hot breath before it slightly laughed and whispered something into my ear, but I couldn't make out what it was saying. It continued to kiss my ear and neck for another couple of minutes before I broke out of my groggy state and moved my hands up to its chest, and I pushed as hard as I could for it to get off of me. I fell off my bed as I sat up looking around, but the crazy thing about it was that it was rock solid, like an actual person was there. 2 months after that, it came back, but stronger this time. Like I was saying, I was going in and out of being awake and being asleep, but this time in the dream, I was in my room in bed with the guy again. The same guy, but he had bat-like wings this time. I have no idea why I was not afraid of him, but he was doing the same thing like last time, but more intensely. This time I saw his face, and he had shoulder-length black hair and beautiful blue eyes. He turned my head away as he kissed my neck again, and I wavered back to being half awake to feel the exact same thing happening to me. I could feel the sensation of its lips on my skin, and I felt turned on by it as I fell back to sleep. I went back to a dream where the guy was holding me close to him, almost like cuddling, but I was facing him. I woke up feeling a presence in my room, but I have no memory of doing anything sexual. The last thing I'm going to talk about is ongoing, and as I type this, I feel like it's watching. Lately, this thing never leaves, and I feel its presence at night in my room. I get instantly aroused now as it touches my hair, face, and neck before I go to bed. And when I do go to bed, I lay on my back before I feel someone holding my hips down and touching me sexually. I mean, I'm not really afraid of it because I believe that ghosts and spirits feed on fear, so I'm trying not to be afraid of this thing. But I'm wondering, what is it? Is it an incubus? I mean, what does it want from me? So far, it hasn't had sex with me that I know of, but I never know what tomorrow will bring. The day I met a serial killer, I was 21 years old, an art student living in Halifax, Nova Scotia. It was late on the afternoon of Saturday the 1st of June, 1996. I know that date for certain because this man was arrested a few hours after I met him and charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder. I've seen him described as both a serial killer and a spree killer, and there are varying definitions for both. You could certainly call him a spree killer, since the murders he committed all happened one after another on a single night. I've always thought of him as a serial killer, because of how he targeted certain victims, and because the murders were so intentional and specific. I call him a serial killer because by the time I met him, 12 days after the murders, he'd acquired a new gun and a knife and several cartridges of ammunition. I call him a serial killer because I've always believed that when he walked up to my friend T and me on the street in Halifax that day, he was looking for more victims. We, unwittingly, told him exactly where to find them. T and I had been hanging my graduation show at the Student Gallery at the Nova Scotia College of Art and Design near the waterfront on Granville Street in Halifax. The show was a series of photographs that included a large number of portraits of drag queens and transgender people, the focus of my final term of work. Sometimes I photographed my subjects as they got dressed or put on their makeup, recording their captivating process of transformation and change. I photographed them at clubs, performing, backstage. I took glossy, gauzy, glamorous studio portraits of them like they were Hollywood starlets. It was different then, long before the word trans entered the mainstream lexicon, except for the sweeping term transvestite, and when the trans experience was more often contained to gay bars or shut inside private parties and homes. It had taken me months to earn the trust of those in the community in Halifax before they were willing to be photographed. Violence and what was then called gay bashing were common amongst those I met. Many had been victimized before. T and I had just finished hanging my photographs in the waterfront gallery, and we were sitting on a bench outside when a man approached us. He was about 30, clean cut, handsome. He was carrying a bag from a local tourist shop. T remembers that the USS Theodore Roosevelt was docked in Halifax at the time, and that we initially thought he was a sailor, one of the many young men the massive aircraft carrier had spilled into the streets, looking for the diversions and pleasures to be found on land. He was nice and friendly. T had little tolerance for strange men, but he was likable enough that she didn't tell him to get lost. Instead, we all stood together chatting in the sun, and after he asked enough times for somewhere alternative to go, we knew he was asking us for a gay bar. There was a big drag show at one of the clubs that night, and many of the people I'd been photographing were going, and we were too. We told him about it and promised that it would be a lot of fun. The next time we saw him, it was his picture staring out from the front page of a newspaper. We learned that his name was Marcelo Palma, and that he'd been arrested not long after we spoke to him. Police had already been waiting for him at his hotel, and undercover officers were apparently already watching him on the street. A couple of the news stories mentioned the shopping bag he was carrying when he spoke to us. His killing spree began in Toronto on Victoria Day. He fought with his mistress and lost his temper in the office of his air conditioning business. That night, he went to his parents' house, and when he left, he carried with him a knife and a handgun with 5 hollow-point bullets loaded inside. He pulled up to Brenda Ludgate first, luring the 25-year-old inside his red pickup truck with the promise of $25, then shot her in the back of the head and left her body on the ground behind a warehouse in Parkdale. Then he picked up a 19-year-old Sean Keegan and 31-year-old Deanna Wilkinson, both born men, but reported at the time to have been selling their bodies as women in the area around Homewood Avenue, a place better known in those days as Tranny Alley or the Tranny Stroll. He killed them all in barely more than an hour. There was a storm that night, and the crack and pop of thunder and the holiday fireworks covered the sound of gunshots in the streets. He stayed in Toronto for a week before fleeing to Montreal and then on to Halifax, where he bought a new Winchester rifle and ammunition and checked into 2 different rooms at 2 different Halifax hotels, both under his own name. He was on his way back to one of them when he was arrested. There had been a Canada-wide warrant for his arrest, and police had been warned he was considered armed and dangerous. News stories said he was carrying 8 firearm cartridges and a knife, as well as a rosary he got from a priest in Montreal. After his arrest, police found among his possessions a book called Without Conscience, The Disturbing World of Psychopaths Among Us. Officers made sure he hadn't killed anybody in Halifax before Toronto detectives accompanied him back to Ontario to face his charges. He was convicted of 3 counts of first-degree murder in the spring of 2001 and sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole for 25 years, which will be about 3 years from now. I found him mentioned in a news story from last fall about a theater program for prison inmates. The story said Mr. Palma had the starring role in the production. In the years that followed our meeting, I became a news reporter and came to specialize in court and crime. I've met more killers, learned more about murder and murderers, about fraudsters and sex offenders, about people who are able to mold and manipulate the people around them. I've had people swear to me repeatedly and convincingly that they were innocent, only to see evidence in court that proved undoubtedly that they weren't. In other cases, I couldn't be so sure. I've met and covered both spree killers and serial killers since then, and have thought often about the space between their regular lives and what lay beneath. I've thought often about my brief meeting with Marcelo Palma, even more so recently because of the unfolding case of Bruce MacArthur, currently accused of killing 8 men in Toronto's LGBTQ community. I think about the people who knew Mr. MacArthur before, now forced to grapple with the knowledge the person who had been to them a friend, a lover, a father, a gardener, a mall Santa. He may have also been, or maybe instead, a monster. One of Mr. MacArthur's friends described him as the kindest person they'd ever known. Others were so surprised they couldn't even comprehend that it was allegedly the same person. One friend told a reporter, "It was an absolute shock. If the concept is hiding in plain sight, he did it." Like illness or injury, it's easier to understand evil if it shows on the outside. How do you comprehend that someone could hold something so brutal within themselves completely hidden and undetected. How could someone capable of such horror appear just like everybody else? It's tempting to think you can see or sense it somehow, but Marcelo Palma showed me long ago, sometimes you can't. Mr. Palma told his psychiatrist he had sex with people, describing them as prostitutes, transvestites, and homosexuals, and admitted he thought about killing people, especially street people or scum. As allegedly with Mr. MacArthur, there were moments his anger and violence spilled out, but except for those glimpses, what Mr. Palma was capable of remained largely unseen. News stories described his beautiful wife, his new baby daughter, his tidy house. Said one neighbor, "It freaks me out. He looks like a nice guy." "It's a dreadful thing," said another neighbor. "They seem to be such a nice family." Even after Mr. Palma was arrested, his girlfriend continued to support him, seemingly unable or unwilling to comprehend that the allegations could be true. As she said in court, "I'll always love the person that I knew." At times, I've wondered what would have happened if Mr. Palma had not been arrested that night, if he had killed one of my friends after I'd unknowingly sent him to the bar to find them. It's a question with no answer, a what if, dark and unknowable. When I think back to that meeting, I'm always struck by how there was no feeling of danger, no strangeness, that I had no instinct to get away. I've always remembered how nice he seemed, and how much T and I liked him. I remember how we invited him to the show that night, and how as he walked away towards his hotel on the waterfront, he smiled and told us he'd probably see us there. "Who could have known?" asked one of Mr. Palma's neighbors, speaking to a reporter after the news of his arrest. "We didn't even know enough to be scared."